Okay, we're being recorded. Um, so let's switch over to some conversation about the new customization options for modern sites in SharePoint Online. Now, what I'm going to show you tonight is still in preview. It's not generally available. But if you have an Office 365 tenant that you can play with, like we do, and it's got it's set to targeted release mode, which used to be called first release, is now targeted release, you can do this. So I'm going to try this in the AZ SharePoint Pros tenant. And AZ SharePoint Pros.SharePoint.com. What's interesting about modern sites, a couple things. They don't show up in the admin portal. Microsoft says there's a new admin portal coming that will show them. So that would be nice. And in order to create them, you have to go to the SharePoint home, which is next to Office 365. Click on SharePoint. Or you can open the app launcher and do it through there as well. And so when you're on the home, this is the SharePoint home. There's not much out here because it's a pretty empty tenant. You can click this Create Site link near the top. And then you can choose, do you want a team site or a communication site? What's the difference? Which do I choose? The recommendation is try them and see. Okay? They are what they are. You know, if you build it and you don't like it or you don't think it's going to be useful, don't use it. Okay? But they have certain purposes. Team sites are for teams working collaboratively. Communication sites are more for communication. One-to-many communication or many-to-many communication or what have you. So I'm going to click Team Site. Now, the thought of a normal, classic, prior to SharePoint Online team site idea, get that out of your head. Because when we say team site now, we don't mean the classic SharePoint team site. The concept is still there, but it's a little bit different as far as implementation goes. It's now tied to Office 365 groups. So I'm coming out here to create a SharePoint team site. It's going to create a corresponding Office 365 group connected to it. So I'll go Team Site 1. And it automatically, try it again. Nope, doesn't want to zoom over that far. I'll show it. My mouse is going to work. Oh, I'm having a couple issues today. Interesting. Team Site 01. And for those of you that can't see it in the room here, it's azsharepointpros.com or .sharepoint.com/site/teamsite01. I do not get to choose the URL. The URL is based on the team name. What if you have two teams? What if somebody created an HR team, you didn't know it, and you try to create one and it's not available? It's not available. You can't. Okay? So these are referred to, these site names are really referred to as aliases. What's the alias of the group? What's the group call itself? And then that's what it uses for the URL. So you can put in a description, and then for privacy, you can choose public, anyone in the organization, or private, only members of the group can see it. So we're going to do public because sharing. You can add additional owners, and try this again. What's interesting right now is it's creating the site right now. The modern site creation process is very quick. And it is creating a site collection, not a site in a site collection. It's doing a site collection for that group. So now I'll click Finish. It's going to redirect me to Team Site 01, where I now have a modern team site, and this is what it looks like by default. It looks similar to the classic SharePoint team site, but it's different. It's modern. It's very important. I'm going to come back to some of these questions after some of the demo, but I will come back to those. So that's all well and good. This is kind of green looking, right? I can come in here to my little gear. I can go to change the look. And because I'm in a modern site, I have modern options. Or I can come down to the bottom and go to the classic change the look options, which takes me to the other change the look page that you're probably more familiar with. So you can choose modern or classic. We'll just pick one of these that's kind of bold and it'll stand out. Try it out. Sure, let's keep it. And there's our team site 01. It's black and green, and there's content in there. It's a modern site, so it's responsive, right? As I look at this on mobile devices or I narrow my viewport here, it responds to some degree, and that's it. If I go to the gear and back to change the look, let's say I want to choose one of these modern options now. We'll go with like an orange and apply. It kind of undoes the classic look and feel and applies the modern look and feel, which you can see is just very minor. We're talking very basic colors. We're choosing a color palette for contrast reasons, and what's available is what's available. Okay? We can add our own. So what I'm going to do is I have Visual Studio Code open here, and we're going to run some PowerShell and do some crazy stuff here, but we're going to import some SharePoint references so I can have the PowerShell I need for SharePoint Online. We're going to go ahead and connect to AZ SharePoint Pros. I've never done this before. Let's see how it goes. Should prompt me to log in. I'm Eric Skaggs at, not pros like pros, but pros like professionals. Longest password ever. Okay, so I'm connected, so now I should be able to do things like get PNP, get PNP site. No, no connection. Oh, because I didn't connect with the right thing. Get SPO something. We got some external users. Cool. So I'm connected, I'm in the tenant with PowerShell. Now what I'm going to do is run some code here that all this is doing is it's putting a long string in JSON format into a variable. And you can see some of the values here. What's the primary color of the theme? There's the hex value. What's the lighter alternative? The lighter, the light, the tertiary, the secondary. All these things. I have no idea what they are specifically applied to myself. This is just what comes out of the theme generator tool. So if you want to generate a color palette, the way to do that, SharePoint theme generator. Where is it at? Here it is. The theme generator tool. You pick your primary color. Let's say I want to be bold and go like a nice red. The body text color, well, we probably want to contrast with that to some degree, right? So we'll go with like a come on, there we go. One of those. That's bound to look great. And then your body background color. And you'll notice as I'm doing this in here, it's kind of giving me a preview of what the contrast looks like. Well, let's go with that. So what that does on the fly is it gives you your output. It gives you your JSON content, JSON, SAS, PowerShell. Well, we want the PowerShell stuff. So I would select all copy, and we're going to put that right here in place of this theme that I already had, which I don't know what it was anyway. Well, that's interesting. I don't know what this means. Hashtag number dot hex. We'll find out. So I'm storing that in a variable called theme palette, and I'm going to run that bit so that I now have a theme palette variable filled with that information. And so now I can run a PowerShell commandlet called add SPO theme. So first of all, before I do that, isn't it nice to know what we already have? Get SPO theme. We've got one in there called My Little Theme. Interesting. There's some other stuff we talked about in the presentation. I said there's themes, scripts, and designs, right? Get SPO scripts, SPO site scripts. Okay. It's part of an experimental feature. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Not supported in the current environment, so I might have to switch back and manipulate the Catapult one and not tell my boss, and we'll see how it goes. Get SPO design, site design, experimental, not supported in the current environment. Now I believe we have first or the targeted release turned on in our tenant, but let me switch over to mess around with the Catapult one, just so we can get through some of this here. So we're going to go to catsysdemo.sharepoint.com. It's going to say, oh, you can't log in because I'm logged in with my AZ SharePoint Pro stuff. So different account, please. And I'll be logged out of everything else too. There we go. catsysdemo. And we're going to kind of do the same thing. I'm just going to do it to a different tenant. That's the nice thing about these PowerShell commandlets is they work for SharePoint Online. So you can do this to any SharePoint Online environment if it's supported, once it's generally available, depending on the settings people have configured in their tenant. And you see me going back and forth between the Skype thing because people are joining the meeting, dropping and joining, hit them every time. I'm going to work on that. But let's go to the SharePoint home under catsysdemo. And while we're sitting there, let's go back to code. And I'm going to just clear this out. And I need to connect now to catsysdemo. Demo, Eric Skaggs at catsysdemo. Hopefully that's right. Okay, get SPO theme. My FL colors in there. Get SPO site scripts. Nothing. Get SPO site design. Nothing. We're going to add one. So what I want to do is I want to take that lovely theme palette that I just generated, this red, green, purple stuff, and I want to put it in available. I want to make it available in that tenant so that they can style sites that way. So my theme palette variable is still in here. It's got those colors in it. Forgive me as I move around the screen here a little bit. Let's try to add this sample theme, and let's call this AZ SP Pros theme. And we're saying the name of the theme is that, the color palette we're using is that variable, and it's not inverted. So obviously you could invert it and have the contrast be the opposite. So let's run that line. So it ran, it should be done. Now if I do a get SPO theme, AZ SP Pros theme is there. Okay. So now what does that do in the site? If I go to create a site, do a team site, I'm going to call this delete me 01. It's in my work tenant, so I kind of want to be remember that I did this and delete it later on. We'll make it public. It's creating this modern team site. Which does tend to create pretty quickly. It's also provisioning an Office 365 group for that as well. Finish, redirect me to the site. And we can go into the gear, change the look. Here's my AZSP Pros theme. Fantastic. We're going to go back to the current. Here's my FL color, AZSP Pros. It's a little interesting because you kind of have to experiment, right? You have no idea what those specific things are applying to. And at some point, I'm sure someone's going to create a blog post or a documentation that outlines that. Maybe Microsoft already has it, and I've been too lazy to find it. Certainly likely. But, I mean, this is how you can add your own theme, which is fine. But what if I wanted this theme to be applied when the site's created? I don't want a user to have to go in there and select it and know, oh, which theme do I use? I want to just apply it. And that's where site scripts and site designs come into play. Because let's say you have a project site, and all your project sites should have the same color scheme so that you can visually tell it's a project site and not a client site or a work site or whatever you call your sites, right? You can do that. So let's go through that scenario. I'm going to take and actually put this back to that. The other theme palette that actually I think looks decent if I remember. So now my theme palette is that. We're going to add this theme and we're going to call this project site theme, whatever. Okay? And we'll add that. I'm in Visual Studio Code. I'm using F8 to run the line of code that I'm currently on. That's why I'm not typing a bunch of stuff. I'm just hitting F8. So now I have another theme out here, get SPO theme. Project site theme. Cool. So this is a project site that I just created. Let's change the look. There automatically. I did not have to create a new site to get the new theme. It's there. It's part of the tenant. And it still looks pretty bad. What if I invert it? Project site theme inverted. True? False true. True. Try again. I'm not refreshing the page, by the way. I'm just closing the panel and reopening it. Theme and inverted. Theme and inverted. Hasn't done much in this case. My contrast must be off somewhere. But you get the idea. We can add our themes. So now what I really want to do to flesh this story out, like I said, is I want to apply the theme automatically when a site's created. I want the user to say, not just create a team site, but a project site, and automatically apply this theme. So we're going to try that. This should be interesting. Let's see, we want to use the project site theme. So what I'm doing now is I'm creating a variable called site script actions. These are actions that are going to occur from within a site script that will add to the site. It is in a JSON format. If you're not a developer, I understand it's somewhat tedious to get here. Once you've done it a million times, it's still that same way. So what we're going to do is I'm going to say we're going to apply this theme. We're going to have an action. I'm going to install a site script that's going to have two actions. The first action is going to apply the theme, the name of that theme being project site theme, which we just saw is out there in the tenant. The next action is we're going to add a navigation link to Microsoft's website in the left-hand navigation. There are other actions we can do. We're going to keep it simple for now. Now, the name of this script, this is the actual variable. I need to first run this to have that happen. And then I'm going to add an SPO site script. I'm going to give it a title. So we're going to call this apply project theme site script. The content is going to be that variable I just defined. The description is site script for applying the project theme. Zoom out just a little bit here. And I'm going to run that. So it added my site script, and what's important here is this ID. Site scripts are tied to site designs. Okay? Think about the process in your head. Forget about all this technical stuff. When you create a site of a certain type, you want certain things to happen, right? The site design is the type. The site script implements the things you want to happen. Okay? It makes sense. Oddly enough, implementation of this is kind of in reverse. You build your site scripts first because you got to get this ID number from it. And then we're going to use this ID number and add it to a site design. So I'm going to. You can have a design without a script, yes. But if you want to put that script in the design, it goes in there by that ID number. So something to be aware of. We're going to add a site design. We're going to call this project site. The web template is 64. So a note on that: when you're in the modern UI and you're given the option to pick a team site or a communication site, 64 is team site, 68 is communication site. Web template IDs. Now the site scripts that I want to include in this site design, paste in that ID. What if I have 18 site scripts that I want to run? Common to limit them in the same string. So this is the description of the project. Let's.
Are the scripts run sequentially?
Do the scripts run sequentially? That's a great question. I am not sure.
I'm wondering if, script number 3 relies on something that happened in, say, script number 1, then.
Yeah, if there are dependencies between the scripts, I could see there being issues there. I really don't know if you can control the order in which they run or not.
Okay.
But that's a really good question. So preview image alternative text, project, site, image, whatever. And then we have this next line here says is default. I'm going to comment that out. Maybe comment that out. Because here's the deal. If I implement this site design and I say it's the default, users will not have the option to choose anything. I want them to choose. I want to see it in the UI. So I'm going to run this. And now I have a site design called a project site that contains that one site script that should apply the theme and add a navigation link. So I did all this in PowerShell. I have a work in progress down here. And now what I should be able to do in the other browser, we're going to go back to the SharePoint home. We're going to create another site. So this is where this all comes into play. It's during the site creation process in the UI. We've done all the heavy lifting. We put together the theme. We figured out what scripts we want to do. And we have created this design so that when users want a site, they just pick it. They don't have to worry about customizing it. We've done that for them. That's kind of the idea. So we're going to click Create Site. We want to do a team site because my site design is only applied to team sites. And now I have the option to choose a design. Before I did this, there was only one option, team site, right? And so I didn't get to choose. Now I've added project site as an option. So let me finish this example here real quick. I'll say I want a project site. We'll call it projects. I'm in my work tenant, delete me, 01. Call it something meaningful, of course. Description, settings for public or private. Next. It's creating the site, so it's doing what it always does. Now, this is where I want you to pay attention. Finish. I'm going to click this finish button. It's taking me to the site. It's doing something. We're updating your site with additional components and settings. Oh, Cookie. My verbs, apply theme, apply the project site theme. Add Microsoft link to the left nav. Check, check. So now, if I click view updated site, it's refreshing. It looks horrible. And I've got a link over here to Microsoft, which was not there before. It was a brand new team site, so nothing had been added to it, but I was able to add a link. So stuff like this is very basic examples of things we can do, and we can take this much, much further.
So using scripts or whatever, you could say add additional libraries.
Yes. So adding additional libraries is an option.
Content types.
Content types.
If you have a template, we used to create a big old template that had, everything configured the way we wanted.
Yes.
Now we do it through creating these scripts that add all those components separately.
Right. So here's what I'm going to try to do, because the question that you just asked is the exciting thing I wanted to try. We're good on time. We're going to get back to questions here in a moment. But down here I have a work in progress commented here. This is where I'm going to upload this site script. Apply the Fuse PnP template. So I work for Catapult. I manage Fuse. It is an intranet as a service that we offer. It's IP-led solution, basically. And so I manage the IP part of it, and I do I'm the developer in the closet, eating pizza, drinking Mountain Dew. Not really, but that's how people think of me. So what I'm looking at doing is we've had a lot of requests for users to be able to templatize their own sites and recreate them easily. When we deploy Fuse to a client, we start with this massive template that has columns and content types and list instances and features and all that jazz. I can show you the template. It's crazy. But what I want to do is I want someone to be able to go into the UI, point and click and say, I need a Fuse site, and just let it happen instead of me having to run PowerShell. So that's kind of what this is. So I set up that variable. We're going to run a script. We're going to add a script here to apply the template. So there's the ID of that. We're going to add a site design called Fuse, and I need to update this script ID that's here, and we're going to apply it to team sites. Question was, can we do it easily without having to do a script?
I've done templates in SharePoint 10
right.
easily without having to do code.
Right. You can still do templating to some degree, but the issue that I'm seeing is we're building much more complicated templates than we used to.
I've done colors, I've done left navigation, all that, everything you're doing, I've done in SharePoint within Designer, but not so code-oriented. So they just made it harder.
So the comment in the room is that it seems like they just made it harder because now we've got to run these scripts and do this code. All I can tell you right now is this is the only option you have to do it right now. This is still in preview. It's not even generally available. Will Microsoft build a UI on top of this at some point? I can't say. It's just the only thing that's available to us now. But the important thing is Microsoft's been rolling out these modern sites, and people have been concerned about what's going to happen. Are all my sites going to change, and my users are going to be confused? I'm going to have to retrain people on how to use SharePoint or whatever. There's valid concern going on around about that, and Microsoft and the PnP team, they are hearing this stuff and they are reacting and giving us abilities to make customizations, but the customizations we're going to be able to make are going to be much more limited than what we're used to. I don't even know if you can open a modern site in SharePoint Designer. I've honestly not tried. You can't? Thank you. So you can't. You cannot turn on publishing features in a modern site, which is crazy. But like Fuse, what I manage, is based on publishing features. So now it's like, how are we going to tackle this little chestnut? I don't know.
Well, you don't have to use modern sites.
Right, you don't have to use modern, but tell that to a client. Oh, you know, yeah, Fuse works fine on classic sites. Client says, well, what about modern? I want the modern stuff. I want the latest, greatest. Like, yeah, Fuse doesn't work there yet. Well, why not? What's going on? Microsoft. They haven't given us the abilities to do what we need to do. We built something based on ABC, and ABC is now gone in modern sites. So we have to figure out how to rebuild it on XYZ, or whatever the case may be. Well, let's go through this, because I want to get this started running. So I've added the site design for Fuse, and I should be able now to go back to the SharePoint home, create another new site, again as part of the site creation process, choose my team site option. Fuse is another site design, so you can add a bunch of things to this list if you want. And we're going to do Fuse, Dev, Eric Skaggs, I don't know, 50. I don't know how many sites I have out there. That happens to be available. We're going to make it public. We're going to click Next. I'm not going to touch anything. I'm not going to breathe. We're going to hope it works.
Well, you can breathe.
Yeah.
But left navigation changes were just not even a SharePoint Designer. They were just based.
Well, you can still change the left navigation in the modern site.
Okay.
This was just an example of automatically adding like a link. So, you know, people always want to standardize things across sites, and so how can I script or automate a way to add a link to all these sites? Just include it in the template, yeah. So, yeah, you can still customize the links manually. But
After site build.
yes, after site build. So this is more of, you want it to occur automatically as the site has been built.
So you don't have to do it every time after site build.
Exactly. You don't have to do it every time after site build.
So this is basically serving like a SharePoint Designer that you're going into the actual.
Right. Right. You have to.
So I need to ask for a raise.
That's right. You need to start learning some code. Ask for that raise. I mean, why not? So I'm going to click Finish now, and it's redirecting me to the site just like we saw before. I should have my panel pop up on the right-hand side. Maybe. Did I choose the Fuse template?
Yes.
I did. All right, let's check something here. Oh, you know what? You know how we were looking at flow? Ha ha ha. No, that was somebody falling off the Skype platform. See how my CatSys demo PnP provisioning is off? Let's turn it on. That might help. Try this again. We're going to do 51. Create site. Team site. Fuse design. Fuse dev Eric Skaggs 51.
This on the back end?
Next. Say that again.
So there's a flow tied to this on the back end?
There is a flow tied to this. There is Azure Functions tied to this. There's a webhook tied to this. And there is the function runs the PowerShell that does what we're trying to do. So let me click Finish. See if we get our panel this time. Ah, look at that. Getting a few things ready. View, oh, trigger flow. Look at that. Trigger a flow called Apply Fuse PnP Template. So what does that mean? Well, I've got some stuff out in Azure. Let's view the updated site. I don't believe it'll have a theme applied to it, but there's something running in the cloud right now that should be adding columns and content types and failing elsewhere. So I don't have the columns yet. Remember I mentioned one of the things you can't do in these modern sites is activate the publishing features? That's what's happening right now is the publishing features are being activated. I believe they still don't work even after they've been activated. So right now behind the scenes, this infrastructure guy is trying to be activated. It'll fail. Somewhere along the lines this will fail. But let me show you what I'm trying to do.
But it's there. But it won't do it, but it's there.
I'm building it now. So there's a lot of dev test stuff going on that it's just broken. But I'm going to take you out to the Azure portal.
I mean, I already have people hating SharePoint. I gotta get them somehow to at least like it, you know?
Yeah, getting people to adopt SharePoint is never fun. Um,
And stay on 2013.
We're still on.
Upgrade to 2013.
No, we're actually going to online now. We got folks who
They said you want them to like it, so go to 2013.
You don't get that choice.
okay, I see your questions. I will be getting to those momentarily. Let's see. I'm going to go to I'm in an Azure Function app looking at an Azure function. And I've got some files out here. Here's my template. This is a PnP template. So I built the site by hand way back in 2015. It took me about 6.5 hours to do all this stuff by hand. Build the columns, set up their data types and properties, create content types, all this stuff. Everything I've been doing for the last 3 years is based on this one file, essentially. I built it once, I extracted the template. And now we start with this template every time we deploy Fuse. So what I'm essentially trying to do is automate through the UI. As a user, you can go pick a Fuse site and have this without me being involved. Okay? It's going to make my life a lot easier. It's going to open me up for other opportunities. And so you can actually upload the XML file here. There's the function file. We want to look at the run file. Sorry, the run PowerShell file, run PS1. And it's connecting to SharePoint, connecting to PnP Online. It's applying the template based on a relative path. So it's actually using PnP PowerShell here in the cloud based on a webhook. So when I created that site in SharePoint, that triggered a webhook, which did some stuff in Azure to trigger this, to run. Now,
does it update your HTML link based on your site?
Does it update the HTML based on the site name?
Go back to the PowerShell file.
Yep.
That path, is that updated?
Oh, this path here?
But that's a source.
Yeah, there's no site URL in here. It knows the site you created because the webhook sent it. So you create the site, it already knows what the URL is, and it's just saying, this path that you see here is actually local to the Azure function. So let's see if we have any features activated yet. Site collection features, we're refreshing. Publishing infrastructure says it's active there. Let's go back to site settings. We'll look at the site features. And the publishing here is active as well. So if my mind is correct, if I'm recalling this correctly, we should be trying to create some site columns right now. So I should have a category for Fuse columns. Maybe. I do. Fuse columns. Oh, there they all are. That's a lot faster than me doing that manually. If I go up to site settings, I have content types I provision as part of Fuse. Fuse content types. Huh. We're missing Spotlight. Something failed. Or that's still going. There's Spotlight now. So this is running right now in the background. I could actually be out on the site using it, adding stuff, whatever. This is happening in the background. And typically applying this template takes about half an hour. And that's me in my PowerShell console on this very laptop, running it, and then I walk away for half an hour, and then I come back.
But it's not being processed on the laptop. It's processed on the cloud.
It's kind of being processed on my laptop and in the cloud. It's client server, right?
Yeah.
So the commands are being sent sequentially from my machine up to the server, and it's a bunch of commands. So I can't really use my PowerShell console until it's done.
Yeah.
And I've had issues with that, as you might imagine. And so if I can make this part of the UI process where it all cooks in the cloud and you can continue your day, that's going to save me a lot of time.
Is there a reason it's taking that long? Just that online's taking that long to respond to your request?
Well, it's why is it taking so long to build Fuse? It's doing a lot. Creating content types. Creating columns is quick. Creating content types takes a minute. Not per, but it takes a longer time because it's got to create the content type, add the columns to it, get the settings and everything configured. And then once all the content types are there, it'll start going through and creating list instances, putting the content types in the lists, setting up the views of the lists. So it's 6.5 hours of manual work in about half an hour. Pretty good. Pretty good by comparison. So I think it failed somewhere, so we can kind of come out here and monitor the function and see what it did. I mean, obviously this is getting more and more complicated as time goes on, right? We've got Flow doing stuff to Azure, which is now triggering this to run. So here's my red X. Failed 2 minutes ago. Timeout value. Timeout value of 5 minutes was exceeded by the function. So other limits, right? Maybe I have to build another script that applies another template or something. I don't know. This is what I'm working through right now, but the cool thing about it is the flow. If I edit this flow, here's that HTTP request. When an HTTP request is received or posted to this endpoint that's out there in Azure, we're going to put together this request body JSON, and then we're going to put it on a queue in a storage account in Azure. Once it lands in that queue, the Azure function is going to see it and can pick it up and do something to it, which is when it knows to kick off the PowerShell. This whole thing, actually, right here in the PowerPoint deck, that link on the right-hand side is the link to how to do this. I followed it step by step. It tells you how to create everything, put stuff in Azure. You got to have access to Office 365 and Flow and Azure, and I'm fortunate enough to where I can do that. But it takes some time. It took me a couple hours to get through, and I created this with the wrong name, recreate it, whatever. But very interesting stuff. So I can potentially automate a process, right? I can build a project site one time manually by hand, pull the template out, put it up in the cloud like this, and then as users go throughout their days creating project sites, I don't even know or care because they're using a template that I've already created, and it's hands off for me. So kind of nice. Let's take a look at some of these questions real quick, and if we'll go through the room as well. Can we add AD groups creating a team site? I believe so. I think that's still the best practice, is put your AD groups in your SharePoint groups. But we can just double check that real quick too. I mean, this is my CatSys demo tenant, so I guess if I were to go to the SharePoint home and create a new site, come on. Say that again, Benina?
Active Directory, I would think that all of the other ways, how useful would it be for companies?
I would think they would allow it too. So additional owners or members. So owners are typically individuals, so I might add David here. Other members. This is our CatSys demo environment. Can I just do everyone? I don't know. All. Domain. I don't even know what groups we have in this domain. I don't manage it. But if you can't do it here, you can still do it through your normal people in groups. Let's go out to the site that I was just in. '51. If I go to site settings, I have actually moved some stuff around in here. What's that?
It's disconcerting that everything's in different places. Yeah, exactly. I'm looking at the top left.
Site collection, app permissions. I actually don't see site permissions in here. Not sure why. There's usually up here on the first thing, right?
Yeah.
Permissions, people and groups, site collection admins.
It wouldn't be under
Look at Bill going down the right.
It wouldn't be
Site
Or are they
collection.
calling it site collection and permission?
Yeah, no.
Well, that's what I'm saying is I
the
don't
whole-
see it at
the whole-
all.
The section is gone.
Yeah, the whole thing.
The security section is gone.
You don't have permission.
I should have permission. Oh, here you go. Site permissions is now under the gear. Site visitors, none. Members, everyone except. So let's see. Can I advanced permission settings? Here we go. So I can go into the visitors group and I should be able to drop my AD groups in here.
I'm going to politely disagree with you that AD groups are best practice.
Okay. Politely disagree about AD groups being best practice. My opinion on that is so that's the opinion I hear all the time, is putting AD groups and SharePoint groups as best practice. My personal preference is, sure, start that way, but the organic nature of SharePoint facilitates putting users in SharePoint groups directly when necessary. From what I've seen, okay, the organization can govern what it needs to, but when you got to do your job and you got to add someone to a site, if you're the site owner, add them. Don't make them go through and, well, first we got to have you fill out this form and get added to these AD groups so you'll be automatically added to SharePoint. Like, that's a nightmare.
No, SharePoint should be managed through users. Use an Active Directory group if the group already exists. The issue with AD groups into SharePoint as the site owner, site collection administrator, you have no idea who you have just given permission to your site because you do not know nor can you see who is in those groups.
So good point. Good point in the room here.
And that's why, as I've always made best practice, is to standard policy users into SharePoint groups, assign your permission levels to your SharePoint groups, just like you would in any other resource.
So real quick, for those of you online and for the sake of the recording, point here in the room is that if you're an admin of a site, you're a site owner, when you're looking at the contents of a SharePoint security group, and there's an AD group in there, you can't see into that AD group and really tell who's in your site, who has access to what. So there's a long-standing difference of opinions on really what would be considered best practice for permissions. I think, generally speaking, let's keep it simple. Put your users in groups, right? And then the permissions are applied to the groups. Definitely try to avoid assigning permissions directly to a user.
Do not. That I totally agree with.
Unless the site goes into your whole organization.
Let's see this.
Like we have some areas that are all of ASU.
Yeah.
So we use an NT authority group
Mm-hmm.
to open up,
As I say, if the group already exists, like, all students, and all students need access, I'm not going to try to add, 12,000 individual students. I'm going to use an all students group.
Right.
Also because you're still limited to the number of security principles you can have in the first place.
Right.
So in larger environments, you start to need to use, groups of some kind.
Yes.
But again, generally speaking, in a SharePoint environment, team sites are not meant for or open to everybody. So you're not using the big groups. Publishing sites, they're for everybody, so we'll use our AD groups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there's many different ways to do it. Next question here is, if we create a site template, do the Power Apps and Flows become part of that template? I can't answer that. I don't believe that they do.
Can you save the modern sites as templates? Is that an option?
Can we save modern sites as templates? Let's check that out. So we're going to go into site information, and then from there, view all site settings, because that's the modern way.
Yeah.
And then we'll search here for template.
yeah.
Page layouts and site templates. Nothing in here about save as a template. So you know what you do. Since you can't save this as a template in the UI, I don't care. Use PNP. Write a script. I know. Write a script. And so the big long-standing problem with SharePoint is if you have a publishing site, you couldn't templatize it, right? PNP bridges that gap, because you can take a publishing site and pull a template out of it and then apply that template to another site, and it turns it into the same thing. It'll turn the publishing features on and do everything else, but it's effectively a template at that point. So let me do this. It looks like we're okay on the keynote questions here. I'm going to just stop this recording.